And there's so much more to it. Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, Tulsi Gabbard from the fine state of Hawaii, and what she makes of this. Congresswoman, always good to see you.
Aloha, Neil. It's good to see you as well.
Are you okay with this Iran czar, wherever we're going to call that person?
First of all, Neil, if I could, I just wanted to take this opportunity to extend my condolences and to really send my heart out to the victims and their families and the community down in Charleston after this tragic event that we all saw last night. With regard to this talk of a so-called Iran czar, I think it really is common sense, where many people across the country, I think, would assume that there is already a person who is designated to be a strong leader to ensure that whatever agreement comes out of these current negotiations is actually being enforced, and that everything is on the up and up.
Who would that person be?
Oh, I think it's premature for me to figure out exactly who that person is. I think what's more important is understanding exactly what responsibility that person would have.
Do we even need it? Do we even need it, Congresswoman? I guess I think we have the Secretary of State doing this. I think we have an envoy dealing with this. We have the President overseeing this. Do we need another czar or whatever in the kitchen to sort of police the pots?
Well, I think if you look at whatever comes out of this negotiation, if there is an agreement met, that agreement that may be signed is meaningless unless you actually have someone responsible for making sure that it is enforced, making sure that there are no violations that are occurring.
Who's doing that? Because the reason why I mention it, Congresswoman, is that Iran seems to have already indicated that some things we counted on Iran to do as part of this deal, like allow open and honest inspections so that we can not only trust but verify what they're doing. And you have the Ayatollah saying, well, no, that's not going to be the case. Then I'm wondering why we're pursuing this at all.
Well, I think there's a lot of very big concerns that still remain that are going through this negotiation process. That, as you mentioned, the deadline is coming up at the end of this month. A few of them you and I have talked about before. The first one being these anytime, anywhere inspections, actually making sure that the inspection agencies can go into these different places to make sure that this isn't a situation of just trusting that Iran is complying with this agreement, and making sure that there are real, timely, strong enforcement capabilities, making sure that whatever sanctions... But what if there aren't? Because
I always get, and you're closer to this than I'll ever be, Congresswoman, and your experience begets that, but I'm wondering if we seem to want this a lot more than the Iranians do, because they don't seem that hot on even honoring the broadest outrange of the thing,
Well, and this is why I voted for the bill that went through Congress, to make sure that Congress does have the ability to weigh in on whatever potential agreement is agreed to by both by the parties who are going through these negotiations, to make sure that these critical issues that must be a part of whatever agreement is reached is actually there. Otherwise, we're not meeting the intent of making sure Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon.
All right, so if there was a provision in there that called for, or we just dropped the provision that called for, verifying what they're saying they're going to do, and they're not going to allow us to do it, would you at that point say, well, this is no deal?
Well, there is no deal unless you have the ability to enforce the deal. Whatever the agreement is that they come out with, it literally will be just a piece of paper unless you have someone responsible for ensuring that that deal is enforced and carried out. And if there are violations, that there are strong enforcement mechanisms in place, hopefully both to act as a deterrent, but then also to provide recourse there that will stop Iran in its tracks.
Congresswoman, you mentioned the South Carolina shooting at the outset of our remarks here, and the President in his remarks at the White House blamed the prevalence of guns, easy access, and that is essentially, I'm cutting to the chase here, paraphrasing, a problem, and leads to problems like this, that it's guns, easy access to guns, and we've got to get a better handle on that. Do you agree?
Well, I think when we look at the terrible tragedy that occurred last night in Charleston, you're looking at a community that is deeply mourning the loss of tremendous citizens within their community and the families, and trying to figure out a way forward from this. There are investigations that are going on to understand, hopefully try to figure out why this was allowed to occur and what led up to it. And I think in the coming days and weeks, we as a country will have the opportunity to see how we can prevent
Well, do you think
kinds of
do you
tragedies
think today
from
was
happening again.
All right, then. Do you think today was the day, hours after that attack, to be talking about that?
Well, I think
guns,
today is a day to be mourning with our friends and our neighbors down in Charleston, and standing in solidarity with them as they go through this very, very challenging time.
Is there any difference between a country where access to guns is easier and countries where it's very hard, next to impossible to get guns? Because in Paris and in Norway, we've had mass killings of a frightening scale. And there they have very, very strict rules in place, much more strict than ours.
Neil, I think you can point, unfortunately these things are never simple.
Right.
Unfortunately, there are never easy answers to figure out exactly how we can prevent these types of horrible incidents from happening. But I think we have to continue to try, and we've got to look at these issues such as mental health, such as background checks, to make sure that these weapons are not getting into the hands of those who would do harm.
All right, Congresswoman, thank you.